Hi there, knife people, hello lady and gentlemen. Today again we're talking about this Microtech Amphibian. And in my typical manner, I'm gonna beat the crap out of it, give it a torture test, do some tasks with it, then sharpen it, and then test for sharpness. And now that I have gained some experience with 3 of Microtech Ram Lok knives, I am finally ready to get into the reason why I think the Ram Lok unlocks on the spine strike. So let's get into it. I have my format where I go back in time. So what you see first is what happened to the knife last, starting with the way it cuts right now. What's happening here, I'm demonstrating this is a regular 2-ply paper towel, and I'm free holding it. It's not attached to the roll and it's not under tension. Take note how this knife cuts. And I advise you to take your sharpest knife and try it at home. See what happens. And this test is something I picked up from another YouTuber as a good indication of how the knife functions overall and how sharp it is all at the same time. This is a regular paper towel tube, unmodified, unattached to anything, and I'm relying on my sharpened edge to bite into this cardboard, which is very fibrous, and it has like glue lines that intervene with it, which makes it a very difficult task to do. Again, feel free to try it at home with the sharpest knife that you own. While on my right you see me sharpening this knife, I will talk a little bit about the blade. The acceleration there is 8x, 8 times faster than I really did it. So, recurve, nothing new there. Look at this Buck 110, it's always been that way. It always had a recurve, and somehow your grandfather was able to sharpen it without too many complaints. Why am I saying it this way? Because there are a couple knife reviewers out on the webs that talk smack about recurve blades and how hard it is to sharpen. Maybe it's hard if you're using a stone this wide, but on a narrower stone, like with this Worksharp Precision Pro that you're seeing there on the screen, it's not much harder. The hardest shape of a blade to me personally to sharpen is the straight blade like this sheep's foot American Blade Work model number 2. This is MagnaCut, perfectly heat treated, so it's a very sharp knife. Let me show you here. Cuts like a charm, very slicey. Great knife, but it was very, very hard for me to keep like absolutely straight edge on this. And another very sharp knife that I own is this Medford Infraction, which I had to resharpen myself because the blade was so asymmetric. That's why it's such a high, almost Scandinavian grind. But this is one of the sharper knives that I own as well, even though Greg and I had a falling out on YouTube over it. I provide the link to that video. Anyway, perfectly heat-treated knife. That's more important to you, is how the knife is heat-treated, than what shape it is, or even when it comes to sharpening, not when it comes to using. And this is MSI by Microtech, and it supposedly has the same steel as the Amphibian, but this steel is softer by about 4 points. This is about 63, and this one is 59 HRC. So I was able to sharpen it almost as sharp as the other one, but not quite. In order to sharpen this knife, I had to remove the thumb. I don't think it's called studs, thumb device. It's screwed in with one T6 screw, so be very careful. It's Loctited, and I had to heat it up in order to remove it. But this is what's under, and believe it or not, it functions quite well without the stud device. A little less pleasant on a reverse flick or on middle finger flick. If it was easy to grind out the bigger hole, I would have, but I think they should just offer a knife like this. I think it would be perfectly functional with a through hole instead of the thumb stud device. What do you think? Write me a comment. Right before I sharpened the knife, I have completed my torture test, and the last of these was coconut opening test. One of my subscribers in one of my favorite channels, are from France, put me up to it by doing a video similar to this coconut opening. Anyway, it puts the tip of the blade to the real test because the shell of the coconut is extremely hard. It's harder than wood. It's almost as hard as, breaking glass, but it's much tougher than glass. It doesn't break easily. So this knife made an easy job of opening the coconut. You have to come in through one of these 3 holes on the top, pick the softest one, and go at it, just like that. Chip it a little bit at a time. I hold the blade in such a way that I don't stress the pivot too much, and that's a good practice. But be careful, and I wouldn't recommend using a very narrow blade for this. The goal here is to not crack it, but to open this triangular hole through which you can drink the juice. I smelt it because I want to make sure it's not molded or stale. Good stuff. This knife is pretty heavy, so I believe I can crack the coconut with the blade closed. There's enough weight and length to the handle to let me do it. And it starts cracking almost immediately. What you need to do is whack it on one of the 3 spines that run across it. And what you will get is this nice, even break right there. I accelerated this video just a little bit, but don't rush in real life. You really want to save every little bit. Shortly before the coconut test, I did this twist test where I rest the blade in a solid piece of wood and then twisted left to right 10 times in each direction to see if it will loosen up the blade or damage the scales. And immediately preceding the twist test, there was my Tree of Doom tip test. I stab this dead oak tree 25 times, as hard as I can manage while holding the phone, and then I pry it left to right or right to left, and I spare no effort to break this tip. This is my stress relief exercise. I go at it as hard as I can, and for example, I broke SRK1 knife by cold steel. The tip came right off. I also broke a very expensive Chris Reeve Omnizon that had a MagnaCut blade whose tip is still stuck somewhere in that tree. So SK5 or MagnaCut or RPM 9 or D2 are no match for this oak. The weight and the ergonomics of this knife combined with this pretty severe recurve and a pronounced belly make it into a perfect little pocket hatchet. I really enjoyed this task because it made it easy. All Ram Loks do this, and the reason I think is hidden in the design of the ram head. Here it is in slow-mo. And here's the ram head. As you can see, there's a ramp built into it. Let me draw a little diagram here. Let's see what's happening here. Think of a knife as a seesaw or 2 levers. One lever is 4 inches long and the other one is 3/8 inches long. That's the distance between the pivot and the end of the blade and the pivot and the point of contact on the back of the blade. So if I strike this here with only 30-pound force, which is not much, then the resulting force on the other side of the seesaw will be 320 pounds. So when I strike the front of the blade, it hits the ramp right here and divides the force in a vertical and a horizontal component. And the angle of the ramp is about 10 degrees. So I am going to calculate how much force in a rearward direction there is. It's 320 times sine of 10-degree angle, 55.6 pounds of force. But it only takes about 10 ounces to start compressing the spring. And that is obviously not enough. So, if you're asking a question, how come I can put 300 pounds over here and it's not going to unlock the knife? Let's get into that. That means you are good at asking smart questions. The reason you can hang much higher weight on the end of the blade and it will do absolutely nothing to unlock it is because it's considered to be a static situation. So statically, when you apply that much pressure, things start happening that are on the material science level, where compressions and frictions come into play, and basically the mechanism statically locks itself. But when you do a dynamic wrap like this, you are dealing with totally different area of the engineering side. So dynamically forces transfer differently, and if you don't want to watch me for 2 hours, which I don't want to explain that. There are a couple of good videos out there, but basically impulses is all about transfer of momentums. So to me, it's clear that Microtech painted themselves in an impossible corner with this design. And I think part of it is marketing influence. I think they listening to external marketing influencers too much, and they giving too much of a say in their decision to their internal marketing people. And the second reason is a little bit of an arrogance, right? Knowing who the chain of command there is, we are not surprised. They decided they can do better than Benchmade with their axis lock. And so if they are arrogant enough to think that Benchmade designers did not consider linear or coil springs in the very beginning, before axis lock hit the market MT years ago, they're wrong. It's an arrogant assumption. The reason the coil spring is not a really good spring for this type of application, it's because it has a highly variable compression ratio. So it starts soft and it gets harder as you compress it. So the reasoning behind choosing this spring was simply not to have an omega spring or any type of loop spring. And I think that was a silly, stupid reason. Now, will I run off and sell these knives? Absolutely not. You know, my first experience was with the MSI with gravery or plastic molded handle, and I liked it enough. I carried it for a while, but something about these aluminum scales here, or aluminum frame, it's really, you know, it's like rings the right bells with me. And the other thing I appreciate is this new titanium milled clip. Is it titanium? Let's test this here. Yeah, titanium milled clip here. I like that. And I don't mind that it's not a deep pocket carry, because it's a long knife. I don't want it too deep in my pocket. It becomes uncomfortable after a certain depth. Let me show you what I mean here. Is if you put it next to the stitch, stitch is about 3/4 of an inch shorter, and the MSI is also maybe 1/2 to 5/8 of an inch shorter than, so when they put the clip that is not deep carry. And you know, the problem is not insurmountable. I was able to fix it on the stitch. So I'm striking it with a lot higher force than the Amphibian, and it's not closing because I modified where the blade engages with the lock. I flattened that area, and so now instead of a single line of contact, there's a flat area which dissipates the impulse quite effectively. All right, this was a long video. It's time to put the knives back into the Tower of Knives, where I have a special shelf for Microtech, ProTech, and Heretic knives. They're all related. They're all Marfiones, doing great things to the knife world. So here they all are. And do let me know in the comments if you'd like to see full-length videos about my knife collection. Well, if you see any knives in these groupings that catch your eye and you'd like to see tested or evaluated, let me know, and I'll be happy to do it, because that's what I collect them for, to share my knowledge.